Now let's get to our presentation. This session was born out of a desire to create a plenary for both sisters and lay archivists, including a leadership perspective with representations from congregations on various tracks along the spectrum of fulfillment, including the other side of the spectrum of fulfillment. They had already gone through it. And so we found a unicorn team today to share their stories. So let us begin. Sister Mary Navarre is going to kick off our presentations.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to stick real close to the mic, and that means I'm not going to make much eye contact with you all on the ends of the rooms, but I do love you the same. I've been told I had a dulcet voice, and I went and looked it up, and I found that now that we're at this end of the days, it's even dulceter. So I'm going to just do the best I can here. So in this brief presentation, I am going to review the what, the why, and the how of one congregation's, of one congregation's transition from its mother house to an interim location. Okay, that looks like it's working. I usually get somebody else to do the slides because I can't do two things at once, but I'm trying this, so if I forget, just holler. The what? Okay. Once upon a time, a mother house was built on the outskirts of the town of Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was about 101 years ago when the Mother General at the time wrote this, and I quote from the archives, "Our new home at Marywood is affording us the quiet and the beauty of a veritable sylvan retreat. It had an academy for girls on the left, the sisters' residence on the right. In the middle was a chapel and the dining room and the kitchen and the library. And it served us well for many decades. But times change. Times change everything. The buildings no longer served our purpose for which it was built, and it was time to move on. But why? Well, this was the reason for moving out of this building that was meant to last for many centuries, and I think it probably will, even more centuries. The announcement came in February of 2020. Marywood is sold. Well, we knew it was coming. It wasn't a total surprise. Everyone and everything must be vacated. The archives must be moved, first to a temporary location and then to a renovated space back on the mother house grounds, and then, in 8 to 10 years, to a centralized location. So it was time to say goodbye. So we asked our staff and our sisters and our associates if they would just take a photograph of a favorite corner or spot. And so they did, and this is one that I liked a lot, so I'm including it here. Our facilities administrator chose this photograph, and he said, "I find myself pausing for a minute when I pass. I close my eyes and imagine students hurrying up and down the stairs on their way to class, a silent testament of a rich past." And I visited him the other day in his home, and you see that picture and the stairwell at the top? He has it in his house. He bought it. The building holds memories in its bricks, its terrazzo floors, its stairwells, and its walls. Our archives hold a unique history of resourceful women, of life among those who were not and are not big shots. Where will our story be told? Who will tell it? How and who will tell the story? Will it be true? Will it be in the history books, the textbooks of America? Will it be on the websites or in the history of parishes, hospitals, agencies, schools, colleges, universities that were founded and staffed by the sisters. I have not found it in any of those places. I have looked. I have been surprised to look at the 100-year centennial brochure of a parish and find full-page photographs of all of the pastors and not a mention of the sisters. The history of Grand Rapids, Michigan, which by one particular historian does not contain a word about the Grand Rapids Dominican sisters, even though they founded and staffed 2 high schools and innumerable elementary schools. It's just not the way it was. So I began to resonate and really appreciate what Jane Austen said when she wrote, "I read it, history. It tells me nothing that does not either vex or weary me. The quarrels of popes and kings with wars or pestilence in every page, and the men all good for nothing, and hardly any women at all. It's all so very tiresome." Well, Jane, I said, you'll hear even less about the thousands of women who built and staffed the schools and colleges and universities and hospitals and social work agencies in this country. But in our archives, in your archives, you will find the story that Jane is looking for. But now, where will it go? How do we pack it up? And where should we move it? How do we take care of this priceless collection? Well, a few years ago, Monty Abbott said, is he here? I thought he was going to be here. He said, "The stories in our archives are the wellspring of our joy." Yes, but practically speaking, which way do we turn to preserve and safeguard the wellspring of our joy? So I was thinking about this, and I was driving home a few days ago, and this time of year in Michigan, before the snow and the ice come, they do all the construction work. So I'm driving home, and I came upon this intersection. It's true. I didn't know what to do. Back up, what? What to keep, what to deaccession. Marie Kondo says there are 2 reasons for not letting go: attachment to the past or fear of the future. So whether decluttering your closet or closing a mother house, the same applies in the letting go. We shall not give in to nostalgia or walk trembling forward in future. So we began the letting go with great sorting and deaccessioning and discarding and getting rid of duplication or what does not fit into the criteria. And these are 3 of, well, they're all, one was an intern and 2 volunteers that were wonderful help in all of those things. So what did we have to do? We had to repatriate, recycle, donate, transfer, destroy, bury, or photograph and keep it that way. So I asked a native man what to do with these turtle shells that had been given as gifts. And he said, well, he thought about it. He said, well, they came from the earth near the river. I think that's where you should put them back. And I did. And I've recycled plaques with a man who's a carpenter. He took the wood, and I agree, please, no plastic. And worse, those acrylic, please. I wish I could make them against the law. We donated about enough Our Lady of Perpetual Help, who has no particular connection to our congregation, but people really love that photograph and those pictures. We could have lined them up from Michigan to St. Louis, Missouri, and back, and walked. We had so many. But there was a particular parish that loved Our Lady of Perpetual Help, and it was honored to take them. We transferred to other archives what belonged to them, and I became an iconoclast. I never knew quite what that word meant, but when I wrapped that crummy statue up and smashed it with a sledgehammer, I realized what a living iconoclast was. Me, I did it. What to do with those little relics that are probably 3rd class and phony? There's a lot of room in the bottom of a coffin, girls and boys. That's where they are. Hey, and sister, she was from Hungary, Elizabeth of Hungary. The relics went with her when she died. She was amazing. Anyway, and we photograph a lot. I love this picture. One of our sisters painted it. It's called The Annunciation. And it's Mary, like when the angel says, God wants you to be his mother, and she's going, let me think about this for a minute. I love that one. So, amid the sorrow of closing and leaving, a greater calamity strikes. COVID-19 shuts us down completely. March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 2021. Our chapel, with its peaceful and serene ambiance, is gone. Our prayer community is gone. We are locked down, living in fear, watching our friends and relatives become ill, dying, not knowing who is next. And we are in exile. And all I could think of, I get kind of melodramatic, so hang in, but there's that beautiful verse from the Psalms, by the streams of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Jerusalem. I get that. We must move forward in faith. And so one of the first steps was to join an event sponsored by the Development Office, and it included a sale we called it, of the century, literally. So art was accessed for their value, the intrinsic value. Did it tell our story? Or did it fit into the new residence for the sisters? What was left over was part of a huge art sale. And an alumni of an art teacher, an alumni of our academy, was great with her friend Agnes. They made a beautiful, this is just a tiny fraction of what the art was available for sale. And it was, everything went, every single thing went. Oh, my 6th grade art teacher, I would love it. Oh, that's my great aunt, I want it all. And how do you price that? How do you figure out what kind of a value to put on it? How about that? Yeah. An efficient way for establishing monetary value. I recommend it. Then, that was the first sale. Then came the sale of the century. I wish I had a better photo, but over the years of saving everything, it had resulted in a hodgepodge of stuff. And the purging had to begin. One volunteer was sorting it, and she says, "Oh, how many ways can you spell Chotsky?" Souvenirs, boxes and boxes laid out on tables, trinkets, mementos, gifts, books, 15 decade rosaries by the dozens, innumerable religious items, everyday items. It went on and on and on. It all went. Every single thing. They came in like vultures, and it all went. It was amazing. I loved it. It was good because it got a good home. It went someplace where people wanted it, and it didn't do any good in storage. We didn't give away everything. We had already culled what we wanted. But I said in my journal, letting go of these paintings and art and objects, it is fraught with anguish. These material things of little intrinsic value hold the memories of a century of women who have given their lives in their quest for God alone. So, in spite of the humor and the laughter and the fun of it, there were a lot of tears. No, we still were to go. Fortunately, a temporary place was available at our city archives and record center, and the price of leasing a little section was reasonable. There were many pros to this. It had very good security. It's a little bit like getting into Fort Knox. 3 keys to get to the place. There's a good HVAC system. The weight-bearing floors are, they're able to bear the weight. There's a proximity to where the rest of people were working, and they had space there to process the collection. However, there were some cons. It's cold. It's cluttered. I could tell the nuns weren't running it. It's dusty, and it had the worst thing of all was the unstable Wi-Fi. So if you need to do a Zoom meeting or check your email, you had to just go someplace else. Sometimes it's out in the parking lot in your car. It was an unpleasant ambiance. There were no windows. The bathrooms were 3 flights down, and at my age, that is a real disadvantage. There was no running water where we were. You had to go 3 flights down. There was a freight elevator or the 3 flights of stairs. Did I mention an unstable Wi-Fi? You know, I really used to have thick hair, like, Ginger Downey, but I was pulling it out with the Wi-Fi problem. And in spite of our best efforts, no alternatives could be found. And so we moved our archives to the city archives. And we hired these guys. It was a good company that specialized in it, and they brought in these carts on wheels. The carts were rough-hewn pine and sturdy, and so were the guys. And they were careful, and they were excellent, and they were strong. And we'll hire them again, because we'll be moving again in a month or 2. And finally, we are in. And this is the associate archivist, Jen. She's here today. She's doing the Vanna White impersonation from the Wheel of Fortune. So I'm going to come to the end here. The grief comes in waves, as does the peace. We are reminded of the 14th century mystic Julian of Norwich, who lived during a terrible plague in that century. And she wrote, "All shall be well, and all shall be well. And every manner of thing shall be well." And then we recall the words of T.S. Eliot, who said, "What we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from." And a Dominican sister she is from Springfield, Myra, you'll recognize her. She is a weaver. And another sister, Dominican sister, I'm trying to think of where she's from. Did it say that? Sheila Flynn, I can't remember her order. She said, "We are still living, the cloth is still on the loom." And lastly, this is a Benedictine sister, one of my favorite poets who's deceased. She was from Chicago. And she wrote a poem called "Don't Roll Our Love in Musty Parchment and Speak of Us in Past Tense. See us now, loving in this living day, with beating hearts against the warm breast of this decade." Thank you.
I see I'm already up there, so I don't need to introduce myself. I am many things, but not too techy.
You need to use your mouse.
Just about. Okay, thank you. As I looked at our archives and was thinking about this presentation, and some of you heard, at other presentations, I'm sort of schizophrenic because I have been in leadership, I'm archivist, I'm communicator, and I work with our retired sisters. So I sort of talk to myself. But as I was thinking about this, I thought our congregation history is like a tapestry. And Mary's picture fits in very nicely there. It's a beautiful story that's ongoing. Parts of it have been done, but there's still parts to finish. There's the main colors that come through that talk about our foundation, our history. And then there are the other threads that we add as decades go on and our life evolves. Now, we are a small community of Dominicans in the Northwest in Washington State. At our peak, we have never been more than 300 sisters. So we've always been small, and we've always been a mom and pop store. I don't know if any of you work in congregations that are still a mom and pop store, but that meant that we never had departments. So people talk about HR and finance and that. We were just all in together girls. Now it's all in together girls and boys. And we really never had an archivist. In the early days, it was the general secretary who was the archivist, and she mainly collected things at the end of the year and put them in boxes. And then they were stored for 50 years. And then we never really had any sponsored ministry, so that was one thing we did not have to worry about. And we also had a novitiate that looked over Puget Sound, which was lovely. And because we had few financial resources, when we decided to sell that, the leadership who sold it appreciated, but they wanted the money more. Consequently, much of our artwork, much of the valuables that we had from the communities were sold. So we lost a lot there. And it wasn't that they didn't care about the archives, but they didn't have that appreciation that many of you bring today that's so important to bring to leadership. Because as we've all said these 3 days, leadership has many responsibilities. But when it gets down to we're going to sell something, be sure you ask, what are you selling? Is there something that we should be keeping? That was the first one. Then we had a mother house and a military academy that was built in 1922 and closed in 1977. And that began our study and our planning of letting go as we tried to think of ways to use the mother house property. And to fast forward, we sold the mother house in 1989, 1990. We sold it to, of all people, the garbage company of Pierce County. But they have been wonderful to us. They invite us back. They're very respectful of the property. And so we could not have asked for a better relationship. But it does sound odd. But however, we weren't quite as thinking money. But again, the leadership at the time sold everything. I go back now and I could weep at what's hanging on the walls and that we will never have again. So leadership, and I've been in leadership 26 years, so I will defend us. But, you know, we all have our gifts. And not everybody has the gift of history, or not everybody has the gift of, you know, what's really important. And that's where I think the archivists come in, as you know what your community has, and sometimes you might have to really knock on the door and speak boldly that, you know, this is really something that's part of your history. And you may not think so, but, you know, we need to keep that. So as we've started the letting go process, we are now 28 members, half of whom are in assisted or skilled care. We are completing our journey, and now we talk about it. Some days it's happy talk, other days it's sad talk, but we are talking about the fact that we are completing our journey, and in November, our archives will be going to the University of Santa Clara. That has, over the time, because we are small and talk a lot to each other, the sisters are concerned about what's happening with the archives. What do we want to do with them? What should we, you know, where are they going to go? Will they be safe? All these questions that come up. And so it's important to communicate with the members, whether it comes from the archivist or the leadership. You know, I'm lucky I can talk to myself. But I try monthly in our newsletter just to send out a little tidbit about the archives. Did you remember this? Or do you remember this photo? Or who can tell me who was in this photo? And the sisters enjoy that. It gives them a connection to it. And I also try to keep them informed in terms of what's happening with the archives. Now it's just a matter of, you know, they are going to Santa Clara. But in all of this, in my mind, it's how best to tell the living story of our history. when I started this earnestly, it was like, where do I begin? Everything was in boxes, some were in files, some were labeled, some were not labeled. So it was like, where do we start? And I had to realize my community started in 1888. It's one of the 19 Dominican families here in the United States. In a small house, 3 women. And then you can see where we are today. I have 135 years of living history on chairs and in boxes. And so how do I preserve that? What do I need to keep? What do we need to dispose of? And that part has been really a dilemma. Now, moving forward, because I'm not an archivist, and I know she'll be embarrassed, but I want to say it again. If it weren't for Ellen Pierce, I probably wouldn't even be standing here. I'd be crying in the archives. But she helped me get a big picture and an idea of record groups and so forth. And so that at least got me started. Then I thought, well, okay, how am I going to do this? So if you're a new archivist, I just simply put out chairs, like musical chairs. And I put a label on each chair for my record group. And as I emptied boxes, I would put them in where they belonged in the record group. Then I saw if something was misplaced or that, I could just move the chairs around. Now, for me, it has really worked well. We do not have a chair left in the center, but it's working well. Then as I began sorting, most of the things, formation, spirituality, foundational documents, all of us, have those. But the more I unearthed boxes, I found that our Marymount property, since 1970 till 1990, had many, many facets to it. And did I separate the facets? Did I put it all in one? Some of it really was property, but other things were not property. So again, I reached out to another mentor, Nadia, because I've been in contact with her because that's where our archives are going. And she helped say, let's just put it under property because it's basically the physical space, and then just list all of the subtopics. So again, and this might be more of a leadership thing, if you don't know where something goes, ask somebody who knows and is familiar with it. And I would say, as archivists, you have that skill, you have those gifts and that knowledge. So, if your leadership is not that comfortable and there are technical questions, call somebody, make friends with a few people that you can call when you have specific questions. We have a few, we don't have a lot, of artifacts. And what do you send to the repository? I've heard that several times during these last few days. And what we decided was we picked maybe 2 of each category that will go to the archives. And in the early 1900s, it was very common for sisters to paint china, and we had loads of painted china. So we have the school we started in 1893, and we have Bellarmine High School, which absorbed our girls when we closed our academy. And so every year, of course, they have fundraiser galas. So every year, we give them an item for their auctions. And because it's in Tacoma, people know us. When they know that it's of the sisters, many times they bid a lot more to get something that helps the school, but it's also, we know it's going to get a good home. So that's how we have chosen to dispose of our actions, or of our artifacts. ideally, when you are finished with your sorting and that, the boxes should look like that, so they can be prepared for mailing. I only have a few. That's the only picture, and those are the only boxes that are ready. The rest are all on the chairs or in sorting tables. And then just want to close with a few things that I've learned over the years, not so much as an archivist rather, but just through leadership and communications. But before that, I forgot. We now have a commissary, and we are coming to completion, and she knows that, and that's why we have the commissary. But our assumption was, oh, she'll fit right in, and she'll know everything. No, that is not true at all. Especially, even when you give her your congregation history books to read, and she reads those, she does not know the culture of your community. And each of us have a specific culture to our own community, the way we do things, what we've done traditionally, how we govern. And I'll give you a good example. We have been, since 1969, functioning as a government team, and have tried to get rid of the hierarchical and have gotten into trouble for it, but so I'm not saying it's the best. But it's been everybody does everything together. Well, our commissary comes from a different structure, still involvement of the team in the community, but not to the degree that we do. So the first time she just announced that we were going to do something, everyone's hackles went up, and people weren't sure they wanted to come. So it was a matter of talking it through and saying, okay, we do things differently, and we have worked, we've worked into that. And somebody mentioned trends. According to trends, which are the demographic projections of our communities, we would not have needed a commissary until 2027. So we haven't even been there yet. And we already have a commissary who would finish her second term come June. So you have to expect the unexpected. Whether you're leader, communicator, archivist, things can change. 2019, we realized that the three people who would have been good for leadership had the gifts, the talents, to develop severe illnesses and are in the skilled care, and one died. So what do you do? So we've needed the commissary much sooner than we expected. Now that can affect archives too. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm schizophrenic, so I get to do it all. But when a commissary comes in, you hope that it's going to be with the same relationship that you've had with leadership. Then we've had a commissary, and everyone liked her, and she was very good, and she died unexpectedly last July, and without any warning to either her own community, the Sisters of Providence, or our community. Again, another expectation. So the Sisters of Providence appointed an interim person for us. So again, it's starting over again in terms of letting them know about the community, letting them know about the archives. And again, I'm fortunate that they just say, go ahead, you make the decisions, go ahead. And I know that's not the place of most archivists. But there are a lot of things that, from the viewpoint of a congregation, we really can't plan. And so what is the contingency? And I would just like to say that I think the archive ministry is a wonderful ministry. It's the way we're going to preserve our history. And you are the only ones who, in a way, get the whole picture, because you've got all of that in front of you. Whereas, as a leader, I have what I need to know for now and what I need to know for the next presentation. And so to really be a keeper of the flame, that is so important. And also, I think as we talk about volunteers, it's important to know yourself. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? I have people who want to come help me, but I only want one or two at a time because I tend to be an introvert. I do not want all 10 of you coming on the same day wanting a project to do. So, and again, that's knowing yourself. One of my friends would be happy with 20 people coming on the same day to help, but that's not me. And then Mary mentioned, and I just want to mention this in closing, about oftentimes we're overlooked in diocesan and archdiocesan and parish activities. I'm also the vicar for religious for Seattle. So I have that inroad as well. I know, it's embarrassing. But anyway, it does put me in a position to remind them that the sisters, that the sisters exist and that we want to be part of this. Now, if I were not the archivist, if I had not been in leadership, I probably wouldn't have that background or feel as comfortable going to the vicar and saying, you know, you haven't mentioned the sisters in 3 of these last meetings. How are you going to involve the sisters in the archdiocese? And so sometimes if something is coming up, you need to, again, be proactive and say, how are we going to be involved in this? You know, what's going to happen? We've had this school for over 100 years, and there's been no mention yet that we're going to have a part in it. So how do we get a part? And then lastly, make friends, especially if you are a new archivist. I have 4 people on speed dial. Ellen Pierce and Mary Navarre for Dominican material, Peter Schmidt, the archivist for the Sisters of Providence in Seattle when I need Northwest and general information, and then Nadia and I stay in close communication because sometimes I just have very basic questions, and knowing that the archives are going there, she's best to say, okay, this is the way to do this, rather than my finding one way and then they want it. Santa Clara would like it another way. So those are just some thoughts on a community that is coming to completion, that is a very small community with limited resources, but we can still tell our story with passion and gusto, and that's the important part. Thank you.
Hello, I am Catherine Lucy with the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet. I'm the director of their Consolidated Archives. And I'm here to give the perspective of a consolidated archive within one religious community. The Sisters of St. Joseph is one of the larger communities of women religious. We currently have about 665 members in the U.S., plus Peru and Japan. The sisters were founded in France in 1650, and then their St. Louis Foundation was the first American foundation in 1836. So I've got a little bit of a very brief timeline of how we got to consolidate, but I'm going to actually read a few more details. It's hard to believe that it was 30 years ago that the archivists back then started talking to each other about consolidating. We had the congregational archivist, which the congregational office would be like the generalate. It's the former generalate. We had 4 provinces and the vice province of Hawaii at that time. So they were talking back in 1994 about consolidating, what the future was going to look like, how they could maybe have similar policies and procedures going forward to streamline things. But it wasn't until 2013 when a couple of those archivists attended the Conference of the History of Women Religious that they actually started to take this more seriously. Our 2013 chapter call to action charged for existing groups within the congregation to demonstrate concretely new ways of being one. So out of all the departments and committees in the congregation, it was the archivist that came forward and said, hey, we kind of have an idea of how we can do this, how we can respond to the chapter call. So then they were able to write a proposal that they sent to our congregational leadership group, which is comprised of the congregational leadership team and then leadership teams from all the provinces. The CLG, as we call it for short, Congregational Leadership Group, they approved the hiring of a professional consultant that came in and reviewed and evaluated all 6 of the archival collections that they had at that time. She was hired to determine the readiness of a consolidated archive, outline what work remained to be done on each collection, and then recommend a physical site to house the materials. She finished her report at the end of 2015, and St. Louis was ultimately chosen as the site. Many reasons include the location on the campus of our historic mother house, which is our original mother house site from 1836. Our favorable environmental conditions of that building with temperature and humidity control, and then the availability of space that could be converted for archive storage. So then the archivist took that proposal, submitted it to the CLG for approval. It was approved. There was an estimated construction budget and a project timeline. And in 2017, they started moving forward with the project. I was then hired in 2018. Let me see what kind of photos I want to show you next. Okay. Here we have what the archives looked like before the consolidation. So the photo on your left would have been the existing records room that the St. Louis province had for their materials. And then the photo on the right was this open multi-purpose space next to the room, and that's where they decided to expand. So then there was about a year of construction, and they decided to build a room inside a room. And some of you were able to tour the archives with me privately on Friday, and I kind of describe it as like a walk-in refrigerator, the way it ended up being. But they basically built a cold chamber inside the space. So there's walls against walls, floor on top of a floor. It has its own temperature control and environmental monitoring, which is very lovely. Then in August of 2018, the collection started coming in. Now, at this point, the congregational collection, which was very small, went ahead and moved in ahead of time, and that went into the first records room. Also in this process, our St. Paul province decided not to move their items to St. Louis. They have so much material kind of rich to their local history that they decided it was best to keep it local. So the remaining collections to come in were items from our Los Angeles province, our Albany province, and then the vice province of Hawaii, which was no longer a vice province. It had amalgamated with Los Angeles. And I also want to point out that these other provinces didn't send 100% of their materials. They sent maybe 80%. They still had sister archivists on staff, and they felt they needed to keep a certain amount of items readily available for use. But they did send hundreds, if not thousands, of boxes. So we have a couple of move-in photos. These are from the Los Angeles province. Because it was a 3-day trip across the country, they had a refrigerated truck that brought in these cartons, and they hired this company that took every box off the shelf, put it in a larger box, barcoded it. They had everything in order, drove it to St. Louis. When it got to our mother house, they knew exactly which boxes to start unpacking first, and they put every box back up on the shelf for us in exact order. It was very lovely. I highly recommend that. And it did take them about a day for each collection. So Los Angeles, they spent an entire day unpacking that. Same when the Albany came. Okay, and this is our finished cold room, as we call it. That room they built within a room. I don't know how well you can tell, but that is a stainless steel floor. It's kept at 60 degrees and temperature 40% humidity, or humidity 40%, excuse me. You can also see some empty shelves in the picture. We don't have those anymore, unfortunately, as we continue to grow. Talk more about that in a second. So within the congregation, the consolidation, like I said, it wasn't 100% of a consolidation, but we are having more materials coming to us. There's some government restructuring going on in the congregation, and Los Angeles and Albany are no longer going to be provinces. They're going to be reporting to the congregation along with our vice province of Peru, and it's going to be called an international unit. So as part of that restructuring and consolidating within these other departments now, they are going to be sending the rest of their materials to St. Louis. So we're going to be filling up those shelves. We have also added a few other collections. We've added the U.S. Federation of the Sisters of St. Joseph Archives, the Sisters of Selma Documentary Archives, and unfortunately 2 of our sponsored colleges have closed or are going to close in the next year, and some of their archives are coming to us. So one challenge that we have from this type of consolidation is a capacity crisis. When we had this report done in 2015, we had no idea that 2 colleges were going to close. The Federation and Sisters of Selma archives were at Avila University at the time. Due to some changes there with leadership at the university level, it was decided those collections shouldn't be there anymore, so we stepped in to help. So we've had a lot of unpredictable situations occur that we've tried to step in and help when we can. Other challenges have been each province had their own classification schema. So what a 100 series or record group is in one collection is not what it is in another. So there's a learning curve for the archivist that we really have to study each collection separately and learn it in order to be efficient at what we do. It was also a challenge only having partial collections from Los Angeles and Albany, because maybe leadership would have a question about the history of the building, and we would have some of the information, but some of it would be there with their archivist, and just having to work together and sometimes not being able to answer questions as efficiently as we would like. Materials also came to us in various stages of conservation or preservation work in terms of what kind of folders may have been used, whether or not there were still paper clips on things, all the things that we try to avoid. So we kind of deal with those as we come across them. Although the consultant did give everyone a very hefty list of projects to do, and they all did meet them on time. But it's just, there's always things that you just can't get to, minor things. There was no digital preservation going on at that time, so that was a challenge. I was hired in 2018 as the physical consolidation began, and I was brought on board to help that. So now we've been playing catch up for a few years, and we got a lot to go with that. Another challenge is finding funds for digitization, especially with AV materials. There's just so many old videotapes and oral histories on audio cassette. It's a slow process. We've been digitizing almost 6 years. We've spent probably over $15,000 working with a vendor, and we still have a ways to go. So we have to break it down budget-wise every year and only do a little bit. We also used to have quite a few sister volunteers in the in the archives, but due to age and illness and unfortunately death, we have lost a lot of them, and we're just not finding sisters that have the abilities to work with us, especially with the technology parts of it. So that's been a challenge for us. But there are certainly lots of pros to consolidating within a larger congregation. For one, for researchers, we're centralized. It's sort of one-stop shopping. A researcher can come to one place and get materials about the whole congregation. So if someone's studying the sisters' work with social justice or marginalized communities, almost everything they need will be in St. Louis, which is very nice. We also are happy to have our temperature-controlled, humidity-controlled 2 storage rooms, where we realize after talking with other archivists how blessed we are to have that. Not everyone has that. Through the collections, it's also easier to identify duplicate materials. So with our capacity crisis, if we have to weed out duplicates, downsize in any way, it'll make it easier having everything on the premises. And because of the large number of collections that have come in unexpectedly, and the need to digitize and do digital preservation. Fortunately, the leadership team has been on board with supporting the hiring of professional lay staff. So that's been very helpful too. So we are currently 2, and we are hiring a 3rd. Digital archivist, I have to promote that if anyone is looking. But yeah, that's, I think, it. So thank you very much. I'll turn it over to the other 2.
I wish we could just leave Sister Judy's photos on there and take mine off, but we'll leave it up there for a moment. I'll go to the next one. Let's see if we can get this correct. There we go. Oops, wrong way. Oops. Let's see. There we go. Okay. I'm Scott Grimwood. I'm the Archives Manager for SSM Health and the Franciscan Sisters of Mary. That might help a little bit there. Before I start, I want to acknowledge something that's very personal to me, and someone that was critical to the process I'm going to be talking about, which is the partnership between SSM Health and the Franciscan Sister of Mary of Archives. And unfortunately, this person could not be here with us, and that is Sister Mary Lou Stuber, who is the former archivist for the FSMs, a colleague and friend, and I'm sorry that God decided to take her home before one more ACWR meeting. I was so excited when we were coming here. I was going to work out a plan to get her here, come heaven or hell, and unfortunately, that didn't work out. So she will be mentioned. So my slides are not quite as attractive as everybody else, but hopefully they're informative. Around 2007, the Franciscan Sisters of Mary Archivist, Sister Mary Lou, that I just mentioned, was asked by the FSM leadership to look at future plans for the archives, because the decision had been made by the congregation that they were going to be leaving their mother house in the near future, and a home needed to be found for the archives. She looked at multiple different locations. I can't give you all of them. I know at the time she did look at Notre Dame and a couple of other places to see where they would go. The SSM archives, under my leadership and my supervisor at SSM Health, reached out to the congregation and told them we were very interested in their archival collections and taking them in. The reason for that is our histories are intertwined, very much intertwined, to the point where one of our congregations literally types in the detailed annual reports for the hospitals they operated. So it's separating the two would have been a disaster for our corporation to be able to tell our total history. So we wanted to do that. Also, we had professional archival staff, a archives facility, the room to do it, and the willingness to do it. So in 2009, the sisters reached out to us and began a series of discussions about going that route of working with us. And over almost a year, we came up with an agreement signed in May of 2010, which would be a 3-step process for transitioning the FSM archives to SSM Health. Am I talking too fast? Just checking. Okay. Whoops, I think I went too far. Go ahead, one second. Double check. Yep, here it is. Okay, so the May 2010 agreement laid out a 3-step process. Step 1 was going to be the moving of the FSM archives to the SSM archives facility. That included the archivist, so Sister Mary Lou did come along. We didn't put her in a box, though. She drove herself. Step 2 would be the SSM Health Archive staff assuming management of the facility when Sister Mary Lou would step down. And step 3 would be the final transition of ownership to SSM Health when the congregation determined that. So backing up to step 1, there were components to that. We had to physically change our space to go from fixed shelving to mobile shelving to maximize our space. There would also be some updates and things in order to accommodate Sister Mary Lou. We did, as part of the negotiations, ask the congregation to underwrite those costs. They were more than happy to do that. We were very judicious with their money, did it very cheaply, including even a whole section of free mobile shelving that I've secured from one of our old hospitals. Get that process in and get everything squared away and moved. In May, officially May 31st of 2013, Sister Mary Lou Stuber retired. As of June 1st of 2013, I took over officially as the archivist. So if you go to the FSM website, I'm listed as the archivist. My phone number is there. Any archival inquiries through their website come to me. So we would then take over the management of the collection. That means is we would act as the archives manager, take care of everything. They still own the collection. And this is an area where I am constantly at battle with my employer and their employees to make them realize that we're managing it, we don't own it. And I will tell you that I am paid by SSM Health. My loyalty is to the congregation above all, and anybody that works at SSM will tell you that. So far that hasn't got me fired, but who knows? So that's where we're at on that end. So we have that management set up. Within the management setup, the sisters agreed, and I'm going to lay this out there, they offered to provide an annual stipend. We did not ask for that. They wanted to provide it. We do use it, but that money is set aside specifically for certain projects related to the management of the congregational archives. And then step 3 is it has to be a written communication by the SSM leadership, and we'll talk about that, or FSM leadership, sorry, to transition, make that final step of ownership. However, I was relooking at a lot of changes had occurred over the last few years within the congregation. One, the number of sisters was decreasing, and a decision was made by the leadership that they were going to start to explore going to a commissary role. They had already moved into collaborative governance, and that got me thinking about none of that was discussed when we were talking about the agreements back in 2009, 2010. So I went back through the agreements, and much to more, even though I was involved in the whole process, I was very shocked and dismayed to notice that there were a lot of things that were not favorable to the congregation in that agreement. One would be that the congregation would lose control of everything. Logos, everything would have been turned over to SSM Health. Now, I don't think SSM Health would have done anything bad, but we never know, and so that was a red flag 1. Red flag 2 did not allow for them to establish any access restrictions. Again, unfettered total access to everything. Again, didn't think that was going to be a problem, but. And again, did not anticipate moving to the commissary. So the problem was the way the agreement was written, the SSM leadership team and the president thereof would have to sign a letter to us transferring ownership. Well, if there's no president, how can they transfer ownership? So there was no stipulation to allow for a different form of governance covering the congregation. Third red flag. One too many red flags for me, so I reached out to the congregation directly and let them know that this was going on. And then we set up on our own, I didn't tell my bosses this, an initial set of communications about amending and changing that agreement. It's better to do than to ask permission later. So, hold on a second. I'm having all sorts of problems today. I'm missing a slide. Oh, where am I? Did I go backwards? I think I'm missing a slide here. No, I'm going. There's a slide missing here somewhere. Okay, so there's a slide missing here. So anyways, we're getting at so we went back to the drawing boards and created a new amendment to the original agreement. That new amendment then set up certain things. So one, the logo will always belong to the congregation. Certain key items such as their basket, which is a key element of their logo, will stay with them only. They control it till in perpetuity. They were able to establish that certain records, they will have restrictions placed on them. We stipulated what those records were. So that's now part of the agreement. So these records, boom, to boom, boom. There were several items that were sensitive in nature, so they went ahead and wanted to have those put in place. We also made sure that the document allowed for whoever was acting, Sister Judy will speak to it directly. The language is, I think, whoever is acting for the congregation, so a commissary can sign off on transferring ownership, I'm assuming with consultation with the remaining sisters at the time that decision is made. And all of those parts, so all of the issues in the were identified, I can't talk today, were addressed. I apologize, it was all written on another slide and some will get eaten. My dog ate my slide. So we have done that. So we've been operating under the current agreement since 2010. I've been the archivist for the congregation for 11 years. So we have something that's been in place. I actually did a poster session about this at the 2013 ACWR meeting, and not in Pittsburgh, in between Pittsburgh and the airport. I'm very common to say that. So if any of you were at that meeting, you might have saw me standing over in the corner with a poster talking about this particular early agreement. It is not for everybody, but I think it is something to think about. At the time when this first came up, and I'll end so let Sister Judy talk, a lot of people were wondering, what are we going to do with the archives? And I know Sister mentioned she's sending her to Santa Clara. And I asked people to think about these ministries that they had founded that maybe they might be willing to or able to care for these things. This is the case here. They sponsored us, they founded us, and we're just able to take care of that material for them, and it made the sense to do that. So hopefully you found this helpful. I'm going to turn this now over to Sister Judy and give her perspective on how our arrangement has been working.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of you this afternoon. I have to say that this is one of those occasions when I acknowledge really very deeply that God gives different gifts, talents, capabilities, and abilities to many people. And I sit among you with great humility, because ever since I was introduced to the life of an archivist through the lens of our Sister Mary Lou Stuber, I have great admiration and enduring gratefulness for all you do in meticulous handling, cataloging, preserving historical documents, artistic and treasures, sometimes not very artistic, but they still need to be served and saved. And then the tediousness and accuracy in doing your functions. So I just applaud you. I think the closest I've ever come to anything archival are my personal journals. And I have to admit that probably since 1980 up to 1992, I have decided it's time to let go of them. So they have been burned, so nobody can find them at this point in time. Scott shared with me your tribute to our Sister Mary Lou that occurred on Thursday, along with 3 other members, and I'm just so grateful that you had time to remember them when you're all together. That's very meaningful for us as a congregation to know that you have special memories of those individuals in your lives as well, so thank you for that. I want you to know that Mary Lou and I began our nursing education at the same time, 1958. However, I interrupted mine to join my congregation in 1960, and at that point in time, we were known as the Sisters of St. Mary. Mary Lou followed several years later. In my first term in leadership, which was from 2001 to 2006, Mary Lou and I had offices in the same building. And I remember us talking one day about her, quote, trading in her skills of nursing assessment, problem solving, creativity, decision-making, and plans of actions. Her comment back to me was, the difference is I see results and know what I can change and do differently. to improve the situation in this role, and that was never or always very true in nursing. I thought, what an astute response is that? But she used the capabilities of another profession and transferred that very genuinely and astutely to setting up the congregation archives. Mary Lou was a self-taught archivist. There was nothing on computers or, self-taught guidelines. So we as a congregation really treasured what she had initiated for us. I have been a member of 3 different leadership teams, completing my last term of office on the 26th of July with the official installation and appointment of our pontifical commissary. During those 15 years of congregational services, I can honestly say that each member of those leadership teams have been ever grateful for what our archivists did and provided and still do on behalf of the congregation. As Scott mentioned, our relationship is very much intertwined with our SSM healthcare system. We are the original founders of that healthcare system here in St. Louis, loosely established in 1872. Mother Mary Odelia came to St. Louis, landed on the waterfront, and was immediately confronted by a smallpox epidemic and cholera going on in St. Louis. We proudly, at this point in time, now that we know a little bit more about our history, say she really began home nursing because she and the sisters, 5 of them that came with her at the time, started going into homes to take care of those who had smallpox. We have organized formally and exceptionally at the time with reunification with another congregation. So when that happened, a congregation that left us in 1894 and went to Maryville, Missouri, and then we started talking in 1980 and decided then to come forward and to reunite. That congregation also had their archives. So Mary Lou now is handling not only the SSM archives, but also trying to preserve and integrate into the space that Scott referred to, the basement of the building in which Mary Lou took care of things, another congregation's archival collection. And then in 2013, when the Mysterio PJP was approved by Rome, there was another transfer, so to speak, of archival information. And that actually was a little bit more specific to SSM healthcare as a healthcare system. And so as Scott said, there continues to be a deeply wedded relationship within our congregations and the system. It's another reason that our archives are housed and managed by very capable and knowledgeable people who are employees of the SSM healthcare system. However, if the agreement is ever changed and our very small community could do something about it, we would preserve and stay and have Scott and Aaron and Olivia, if they're willing, to continue to service us with the intelligence and the exactness and accuracy and tedicy they have. Scott mentioned the agreement. I was not around in 2010 to know all about the particulars not favoring the congregation, but I'm so grateful that somebody on the outside, was able to pick up on what was missing, and to really come forward and say, we've got to look at this again. So with another set of eyes, I have to say we are in a very good position at this point in time with Scott's leadership. Scott asked me to express or share a little bit about the values of archives and the processes that are set up for us as part of a leadership team. I have to say that one of the first things that I think all leadership teams, since we have transferred, transferred the archival services, is that there is agreements in place. Agreements that talk about space occupied and rent monthly stipends for the service to be retained. Secondly, there was the identification of copyright items and setting forth guidelines for use of our congregational items as a must. Every one of our members on the leadership team have had this list to consult. The title is Copyright and Use Guidelines for Franciscan Sisters of Mary Materials. Scott mentioned our logo. There's other things very precious and important to us. And one is the initial basket that Mother Mary Odelia came to St. Louis with from getting off the boat in New York and traveling this way, and that she used to carry items to the sisters who were ministering to the early settlers in St. Louis. That also is a precious article for us. What this document provides is with the interconnection within the healthcare system, I feel so much of our history, even though some of it is preserved within the archival space, still is lived every day through our healthcare system. And they are frequently wanting information, can we do this? Can we do that? What about this? Can we have this picture? And so this document basically helps them understand what indeed they can request, and thank goodness it goes through Scott, and Aaron and Olivia I know are involved in this, so I'm sure they get 1,000 requests throughout the year. I'm grateful they handle it and not leadership at this point in time. But it's important for the staff within the healthcare system also to know what they have to do in order to give credibility to where the document source is coming from. So this has been a very helpful document, and I think, provides a sense of how shall I say this? A sense of we want the history to be shared, but also there needs to be some recognition and caution that comes around it as well. I think another thing was that initially we had education with our sisters, as to what items could be sent to archives and retained in archives. So they didn't think that they could send multi-photo albums to archives of pictures that they had taken while on personal vacation trips. Mm-hmm. Oh, they'll just keep them for safekeeping. And we said, no, those don't go there, sister. You have to find some other place to keep them. And I think that you may have one or two albums that you're still holding for one or two of our sisters, right?
We have a few interesting items that are personal, yes.
Yes, right.
Still have to get home, so yeah.
Just let you know, the sisters don't always follow directions.
Well, that was before you said you told them, so it's early stuff. It came earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it came before that. Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody's followed the rules since you said so.
Right. We haven't done this in a while, but I think it's something that I would recommend, and that is having our sisters tour the archives themselves. I think it gives them a different perspective. It also gives them an appreciation of the volume of information that is retained, is categorized, and the work involved by the staff in getting this organized. A greater appreciation, certainly has ebbed within many of our sisters, for our archives. With our new canonical and management structures known as collaborative governance, and this is a process that my community has been involved in, initially, if you will, beginning discernment 2011, and now just coming to some direct implications. We are working with another congregation, the Sisters of the Precious Blood in O'Fallon, okay, working with them for this collaborative governance effort. And what we wrote bylaws and worked with canon lawyers, et cetera, to be sure that we weren't doing anything illegal. But I think it has allowed us to work ahead and to set up our management structure, as well as now that we have the commissary is the canonical position. My experience and our congregation's experience is so different than what Sharon explained to you. We have had with that structure of governance and management an opportunity to work with our staff in those positions for at least 5 years now, so they understand what it is and how we are directing the collaborative governance among these two congregations. It is our hope that when the Sisters of the Most Precious Blood in O'Fallon send their request next year, they will also get the same appointment of a commissary that we have. We're only 22 miles apart. Rome keeps saying, we can't keep doing this, there's not enough people out there. Those of the religious sisters sitting here know that as well. It's a worry also for ACWR. So it's a different model. But what I wanted to point out is that it does take time to get other people on board to understand culture of the congregation, as well as the ministries, the history, and part of the partnerships that have been established through their presence in their own living congregational area. O'Fallon's only 22, 25 miles from us, but it's a different culture than what we have. And so it just has worked out for us that is important. Another thing that has been very helpful for us, and again initiated by Scott and his staff, is to maintain a list of different archival assets, I should say, that need to be returned to the archives. So maintaining a list of statues, stained glass windows that we have in different places that came from our mother house, a historical quilt, pictures, those things that need to be turned back to archives, that list needs to be kept and updated so that then that continued respect and treasure allocation does go back to archives. I think another thing that was important for us, and I can't speak to any volume, but I do know that Scott has had that request, is that there are signed contractual agreements with individuals who wish to do research. And I think that's so important to have those signed agreements. So again, another thing that Scott would call and say, this person is interested in this, what do you think? Are they looking for some information on one of our sisters who's been deceased for, 50-some years, plus, a lot less than, but it's important to have that signed agreement there also. I think the other thing that has been so essential for us is to keep open communication. I never thought that I would be using Zoom as much as I use Zoom. I think that's one of the blessings of COVID, if I can say that there's a blessing connected to it. The other is email, and the other now is text messaging. I love all three of those opportunities to be in communication. And I just think we cannot communicate enough when we're trying to preserve something so treasured to our congregations for the sake of perpetuity. One last thought. Each of our archives now are a very special home. They have our treasures, and we hope that we continue to add more treasures to the space that can accommodate them. We need to think that it's just not a storage area. There are life-giving messages and life-enriching information contained in those archives. I wish sometimes, and now that I'm partially retired because I'm doing a lot of reorientating with different people, that maybe I just go out to archives and just sit and pick up a book and say, read it and say, oh, isn't this interesting? Because I know there is interesting history in my congregation from 1872 that probably I am not even aware of at this point in time. So I thank you for allowing me to share a few things that have been meaningful for us as a leadership team. I guess we're ready for questions. Is that where we go next, Lisa?
So we're kind of running out of time here, so I'm gonna let Sister Mary review her final slide, and then I'll open it up to, we'll take a couple questions. Your slide is up here. Do you want me to remind you the question?
Sure.
Okay.
I am really concerned about people's energy.
Yeah. There we go. Take a little stretch. Okay, I posed questions for each of them, but we're really only going to have time for this one. So I'm going to have Sister Mary answer the following question. How can the archives serve as a repository for congregation legacy and charism?
I've had it too, so this is going to be short. A charism, that's a funny word. And it's an important word, and it's a word that you can get a lot of different answers for. So go back to the Greek. It's pretty, and it's important because it's in Greek. Or you could put it in Latin. It would be important too. But what it means is a gift. It's a gift from the Holy Spirit. And it's a power. It's a powerful gift. And it's ancient, and it's important, and it was given to a congregation at a given time in history because it was desperately needed. So the Benedictines have a charism, and in Latin it's ora et labora. Did I say that right, you Benedictines? It means prayer and work. It means balance. And it was needed because at that time there was not much balance. There was a lot of, craziness going on. And every single congregation is the same thing. It's got a special gift. Dominicans and, everybody has one. It's been lived out through the centuries by the sisters who have vowed to dedicate their lives in the quest for the living God through that congregation with that specific gift. Over the centuries, much good work was done, and there was a lot of accretion. You ever see like those barnacles that get caught on a ship? Well, there was a lot of barnacles on the ship. So when you started reading for the charism, you found people going to conferences to see how many candles should we use for benediction? How many inches should our skirts be above the ground? Whew, that has nothing to do with anything. So in 1965, there was a significant thing happened called Vatican Council II, and it was renewal. And the sisters read all the documents and studied them, especially one called Perfecte Caritatis. And in that document, we got a mandate. A mandate. That is not a suggestion when it comes from the Vatican. Got it? Mandate. That means do it. Just do it. And what was the mandate? It was to return to the sources from which your life has sprung. What are your sources? The founder of your congregation. The gospel of Jesus Christ. And so we did, and we adjusted and adapted it to the times that we were living in. That's all. That's all it is. It's really simple. Charism, gift, significant, unique to your congregation, lived out, got all gummed up with the years, got clarified, and now it lives in the archives. So the archives is the way the legacy is protected and served. The charism is transmitted through the archives. That's it. It's really important, the archives. And it's important that you don't take a shortcut to understanding your congregation's charism. It's not an easy word to understand. It's a profound and deep gift that was given to your congregation, unique to your congregation, because it was needed. Now, how do you adapt it for our times that we're in? That's it. That's it. Go have dinner.
Okay. We're almost going to release you, I promise. I think what we'll do, if anybody has questions, can I ask the panel just to stick around for a few minutes? We'll handle it that way. I know people are anxious to move on. You do have an evaluation, and I have a few last-minute announcements. Dinner, please pick up your colored placard cards before you come into the room and place it where you'd like to sit, and then they will serve you dinner accordingly. The brewery has been great to work with, so if you ever are looking ahead at hosting an event or just simply staying here, they're very supportive of Catholic communities and offer discounts. Good to know.